Cameron, you've got your March figures, March quarter, March month, out today. What are the figures showing us?
So they're showing that over the month of March, property values across the combined capital cities increased by 0.2%. And over the first quarter of the year, there was no change in the values, so 0% growth. And what we saw is a fairly strong January and then a fairly weak February result. And then March has been fairly neutral, obviously, with that 0.2% increase. So slightly better conditions for the housing market in the first quarter of this year than we saw through most of 2011. Across the individual cities, we've seen that Sydney, Brisbane, Perth, and some of the other smaller areas like Darwin and Hobart have done quite well over the quarter and over the month. Over the areas like Melbourne, on the other hand, have seen values continue to fall, as has Adelaide. So it's been a bit of a mixed bag, and we're seeing a bit of a variety depending on which capital city you go to.
So you didn't see last week Stockland downgraded their numbers because they'd seen a big weakness in February and then into March. Your numbers don't seem to show that.
No, they're not showing those same results, and I guess that might be a consequence of Stockland having a lot of exposure at the moment in the Melbourne market and the southeast Queensland markets, and particularly for them, a lot of exposure on the Sunshine Coast market. While Brisbane's shown a little bit of improvement, you look at the figures for the Gold Coast and Sunshine Coast, they're not as strong, and obviously Melbourne, after having a really good run over the last 4 or 5 years, property values are up 45% since 2007. That market's certainly cooling down now, and we're seeing a lot of stock on the market and slower time to sell.
So Sydney, Perth, Brisbane, more optimistic than you were, say, a month ago?
Look, I probably was a little bit more optimistic than most about those three markets. I'm certainly not getting carried away with 1 month worth of positive data. Obviously, a lot of transactions tend to happen in March, and it's usually a bit of a stronger time of the year for the market. But I still think that we're starting to hit a turning point in the Perth and Brisbane markets, and I think Sydney's still going to be one of the better performers. But in saying that, I still don't think we're going to see any sort of runaway growth in property values. At best, I think we can expect growth in line with inflation.
So what will the Reserve Bank, when they sit down tomorrow, what will they make of these numbers?
I think they'd be pretty happy with these figures. They probably at the moment wouldn't like to see the market going too much faster or stronger than we're seeing at the moment. When we come back after Easter, you tend to see a little bit more activity to the end of April, and then May, June, you start to see sales volumes fall as it gets to winter and people worry about other things and potentially wait to spring to list their properties. So I think we may see another positive figure next month, only probably slightly positive, and then after that I think we'll see fairly flat conditions and maybe some month-to-month falls in values.
And what are your figures showing you about yields and rents for investors?
Markets like Adelaide and Melbourne, where you've got more sufficient supply of stock and you've had a lot more construction activity in recent years, you're not seeing that same level of growth in rents and improvement in yields.
So it's clear that the Melbourne market is actually really cooling.
Definitely. I mean, the funny thing about the Melbourne market, though, is that the auction clearance rates are still up above 50%, but the market certainly is showing signs of cooling, and simply due to the fact that property values have had really strong growth over the last 4 or 5 years, and every other time that's happened, we've seen the market cool. It happened in Sydney after 2004, happened in Perth after 2006, and it happened in Brisbane after 2007, and I can't see any reason why Melbourne would be any different.
What about Sydney? Sydney's going to be... what sort of growth are we going to see in Sydney? We've been waiting for it for a long time.
Well, it's been a long time. We obviously did get some growth back in 2009 following the financial crisis. I think you'll see Sydney be probably the best performer over the year, but I think even saying that, you're going to see growth in values of less than 3% over the year. I think at best you can expect growth in line with inflation.
Thank you very much, Cameron Kusher.
Thanks, Rob.
RP Data.